Welcome to Daps Magic, Disney and Positive Stuff. I'm Mr. Daps, and thank you for listening once again to this podcast from dapsmagic.com. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day, week, month, whatever it is when you're listening to this. And I hope that you know that we are thankful for you for listening to this, for being our friends, for saying hi in the parks, and all the other interactions we get to have. As we move into this episode, it really comes out of the inspiration that I found after watching Disneyland Handcrafted a couple of times now. Thankfully, it's on YouTube and also Disney+. But these are ideas that have been percolating in my mind for a little bit since seeing this film for the first time at the Walt Disney Studios at the blue carpet premiere. And so I wrote them down and I thought I would share them with you today, which means this is going to be a discussion. Yes, it's just me for this podcast today, mainly because I felt like if I brought other people in, this might end up going too long. So hopefully this doesn't get too long. Hopefully you find this informational and inspiring maybe, and even maybe it'll be something that you want to talk more about. And if you do, there's a couple places you can do that. Always find me on social media. Happy to chat there. Also, we have Daps Magic HQ, which you can find on the website on the homepage, where we have more conversations. You get behind the scene looks, all sorts of fun stuff that what we do at Daps Magic. And then you can also find us on Facebook or YouTube. Those are great places as well. But what today is really about is Disneyland Handcrafted and the lessons that I took away when I saw this film. And really, they're lessons from Walt Disney, which is appropriate because we like to focus on Disney and positive stuff here. But in this documentary, you get a look at the making of Disneyland from the ground up, quite literally, in the space of a year. And you realize very quickly that this isn't the shining, shimmering fairy tale that I think a lot of us kind of just assume it was as we go to Disneyland. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, it was this on the 17th of July, 1954, and then snap, here we go, July 17th, 1955. It's a thing. It was a rough process. It was a lot of risk. It was a lot of challenges. And out of these challenges and these risks, you start realizing there's also a lot of not just leadership lessons, but life lessons and success lessons that you can take from how Walt Disney approached these challenges. So today I want to look at the unpolished side of this. It's not the perfectly Disney-fied fairy tale. It's the pre-Disney. It's what got to the tale. It is the tale. And honestly, I think this is more inspiring than a fairy tale in many respects, because you do see the dirt, because you do see the challenges, because you see it firsthand, because of all that archival footage that we really haven't gotten to see like this before, that gives us the chance to be a fly on the wall as Disneyland was built in 1954 and 1955. So I have about 5 or so takeaways. We'll see how many I actually end up doing that came from this film that Leslie Iwerks made. And really, if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it first and then come back and listen to this. You'll thank me. You'll thank Leslie Iwerks, who made this. You'll thank Jason Recker, who approved this at Disney Experiences and made it so that we can now watch this, be inspired by it, and learn from it. So my first huge takeaway watching this, and this was something I walked out of the theater thinking, is the importance of vision. Throughout this whole thing, vision was the North Star. Walt Disney had a vision that really, as you listen to the different interviews or the talking, they're not even talking heads, but as you hear the different people speak during this documentary, a lot of them didn't actually understand what this vision was, but they knew that Walt had it. And so maybe bankers, they just see really expensive orange groves. Walt Disney had an idea and a vision for a living movie that people could go to. They could be a part of it. They could be making their own movie story as they walk down Main Street and into Frontierland or Adventureland or wherever it is that they happen to want to go on that adventure. And that's something we see today. It's interesting. I was thinking of different things we've done, say Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, where it's living your own Star Wars story, or we hear a lot of living your story or being a part of the story at Disney. And that's something that really goes back to Walt's vision from the start. And his vision really was the anchor that kept the Disney Corporation moving forward to that goal in July of 1955, because he knew where they were and he had that vision of where they were going. And if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. You've heard the song, you know the quote. But this is also what grounded him when things went wrong and tried to take him off track, because, you know, life is life. And he was able to continue to navigate towards his final destination of this is Disneyland, this is what it's going to be, through all of those challenges through that just a year. And it's really an importance, my takeaway of this, it's really the importance of why it's important to have a quote unquote why for what you're doing. It keeps you from drifting too far to one side or the other. It keeps you from getting sidetracked and heading a different direction when you really wanted to be heading for your, in this case, Disneyland. And it keeps you moving forward to quote another Walt Disney quote, or paraphrase another Walt Disney quote, but it really keeps you heading in that right direction. And then these setbacks and these challenges are just that. They're not failures. They're just a bump in the road. And I think that's, if that was the only thing we took away from Disneyland Handcrafted, it would be fantastic, but it's not. Because this was coupled, and this is number two, my second thing I really observed, by a fiery passion in Walt Disney's gut. This wasn't something that Walt was just this is my dream, this is what it looks like, this is the vision. This was something that Walt Disney was going to make happen come whatever. It didn't matter. He had to sell this to his brother. He had to sell this to the banks. He had to sell this to his own wife. He had to sell this to friends that really you would expect to be the ones that be like, oh yeah, let's support our friend. And they did, but they also thought he was crazy. You know, they talk about, or Art Linkletter actually shares about how Walt drives him out into the middle of nowhere and says, this is this big secretive thing. And Art Linkletter's like, okay, so what? And Walt really had to have that passion to keep moving forward, even when the people around him didn't understand the vision, didn't have the passion for it, did have love for Walt Disney, but that's a lot to be up against when you're trying to move forward, when you're trying to create something that's never been created before, and to try to do something this big. But there is a thing about passion. It's contagious. So then Walt's not walking around having to be this is my vision, follow out my orders. This is my vision. This is the story we're telling. People may not understand it all, but the passion, people understand that. People get excited by that. People want to be around that. And so I kind of think one of the best things that Walt did was share his passion and share that vision with other people through his passion so that they could get passionate about it too, even if they didn't understand it, because they knew that whatever this thing was going to be, it was going to be something special. It was going to be something unlike they'd ever seen before because they didn't know what it was going to be. And that helped keep things moving forward. It helped keep the team together. It helped people wade through the unknowns and feel that that was maybe something that was okay because the end goal was bigger than all of these little challenges along the way. And that passion just continued to grow and continued to move forward. And as we all know now, it's led to countless parks around the world and experiences and ships and movies and you name it, because the passion continues to grow, and the passion continues to be about creating something bigger, something better, something that tells a better story, which really is what's important with all of that. And it's building on the solo genius of Walt decades and decades and decades ago and continuing that legacy of how can we tell a better story? How can we make a better experience? How can we do something that hasn't been done before? That innovation is very important with that as well. And that's because that spark of passion, which was probably more than a spark back then, has built into a flame and continued to just go further and further through the last 7+ decades. Next one. This was a messy process. It was a very challenging process, but there's beauty in that. In the film, we see a lot of challenges that Walt and his team faced. Yes, there's the financial challenges. Yes, there's deadlines. If the deadlines aren't met, there might not be a Disneyland. There's doubts, which maybe is one of the worst challenge to have in your own heart and head, and then also with those around you, especially when you don't know, like, this is something you've never seen before, so you don't know exactly what this is going to be. And then you have the physical challenges too, of mud, of hills, of dirt, of trying to get water to stay in the rivers of America. There's so many different things that they were facing against. And that could have been something that really stopped things. You could have gotten stuck in the mud, or, when the guy jumped off of the caterpillar, that could have been the end of the story. And the thing that Walt knew, though, was that perfection isn't in the starting point. Perfection isn't in the midpoint. Perfection is the goal. And you can't get to perfect without the messy part first. And as I think about that, like, how often do we tell ourselves, let's just wait for the right moment? Let's wait for it to be all of the perfect conditions, with the perfect timing, with the perfect people, with the perfect financial scenario, whatever it is. How many times do we get stopped by well, it's almost ready, or, well, it'll be ready in a week or a month or a year, or when I have this, then I can do that. All of these questions that pop into our head. But you look at the Disneyland story and you quickly realize that if you didn't have this messy part of building Disneyland, you wouldn't have the beauty that comes later in The Happiest Place on Earth. And this came from, all of the things I listed before, but also embracing that mess and realizing that that's just part of the process. You start thinking about how many things were just built without a blueprint. Maybe it was a drawing on a piece of paper of, like, okay, this is roughly where rocks are going. This is where a berm is going. This is where some trees are going, or this is what the castle is going to look like. Or, there were so many different things that just started without everything in place, which is not something we often think about or do in this day and age, because I feel like now, so often, especially in business, you don't take the risk until you already know what the reward is and that it's guaranteed. And you've done all of these statistical analysis and dug into it, and you're like, all right, we've got this. But sometimes the greatest rewards come from the greatest risks that are coupled with that vision and the passion. And so I think of, there was one point in it, and I can't remember who said this, but they were talking about how when they started, Walt didn't know how to read a blueprint. He learned along the way. And I think there's something to be said about learning along the way, especially in our personal lives, because we so often get stuck at the challenges of what are in front of us, and the fact that, oh, we might mess up, oh, things might get broken, or the different bumps along the way. And those little bumps along the way are what help polish the end product. And you can't have a beautiful end product unless you've learned the lessons that you just have to experience to get there. And I think of all of the different lessons in my own life, whether it's how to build a website, how to do this, how to make videos, how to make a podcast, whatever. Every time I've tried something new, it has never gone perfectly the first time. In fact, most of the times I've totally biffed it up at some point. But what's happened is I've learned from these bumps along the road, and every time I come out of it, all right, that was something, don't want to do that again. What can I learn from it? How can I avoid from it? How can I make it better the next time? And then we keep going. And you think of with Disneyland, Walt did the exact same thing. So he goes through a year of very messy building Disneyland super fast. And this miraculous park comes out of the dirt, quite literally. And what does Walt do? He doesn't sit there polishing it. Yeah, he's always plussing it up. Yes, he's always improving it. But he's also always looking forward to, like, how could we do it better next time? What are the lessons we could take from this and do something even better? In this case, his mind goes to the Florida project in Epcot. And I love that message, and I love that lesson, because it's never standing still. It's always moving forward. It's always looking for the better. And it's always taking these challenges or these setbacks and turning these failures into lessons that can be learned for something even greater. And I think so often failures are viewed as something negative. And I love the quote that Walt Disney says. We hear it in the Opera House every time you go in and you see Walt Disney Magical Life, that everybody should have a good failure when they're young. And he talks about how he learned a lot from that. And I think that's a lesson that continues on through Walt Disney's life year after year after year. Next thing, the power of human hands. This is really one of the core things you see in Disneyland Handcrafted. Disneyland Handcrafted really is about people getting in, doing the work, getting dirty, nobody being too good for any job. Literally just going in and making things happen. Whether that's, the Harriet Burns, the Bob Gurrs, the Bill Evans of the world, or the person, climbing on top of the castle to buff one of the turrets and polish one of the spires, I guess is a better word, or that guy that goes on top of the rocket. Incredible. Like, I just look at all of these things that are happening. And it's so often when we think of Disney, we think of the Disney brand and we think of the stories. And it's very easy to forget that behind every attraction, every park, every movie, every show, every ship, there's people that make this happen. And that's something that we can't ever forget. Because the moment we forget the people, you really lose the power. Because that's where the heart is. And you think of all of the different skill sets that came together to, just make a castle. You have architects, maybe. I'm assuming there were some architects there. You have the builders. You have the people that come in and make the details. You have the people that are making flags. You have the people that are like the engineers that are like, oh, we can make this drawbridge. And we have the people that know how to make bricks. Well, it looks like bricks. And we have the painters, and there's so many different people. And this is all built off of the artist that originally drew the picture. But you have so many different people that know how to do one piece of the puzzle. And everybody brings that unique skill to the game. And when you combine them together, that's where the magic really happens. Even here at Daps Magic, I am not the world's greatest tech person. I'm not the world's greatest anything, really. There's lots of different elements that go into making Daps Magic happen. So maybe, it's Merlin working on the coding for the website. Maybe it's Angela giving me advice on where the best place to shoot World of Color for Hurry Home at the Lunar New Year is. Maybe it's Katie giving me perspective on how things are interacting and being reacted to around me, and kind of being one of the many, Jiminy Crickets that help keep us focused on, like, oh yeah, don't worry about that. This is the goal. This is all about Disney and positive stuff. This is the keep kind, share magic, core, central purpose of what we do. And you can't do this without people. Roger's popping into my head, helping with both articles and social media and getting videos, and same with Steven, who's getting photos and literally being eyes on the ground that see stuff and notice these details that maybe I will miss or maybe somebody else will miss. And everybody brings that unique perspective and that unique skill to the team. And all of those unique pieces come together to make a much bigger picture that's so much more beautiful. And you think of Disneyland as if everybody had been great at just building buildings, and there hadn't been someone that's like, hey, you know what? The aesthetic of these buildings are important, or the history of what these building stories are telling are important, so we should make them look like that. Or the person that thinks about plumbing or the water fountains, or even the flow of traffic, like where are people going to go? How are they going to do this? There's so many different things. If you don't have the right team, you don't have the right outcome, I really think. And we combine all of these lessons that I've pulled from together, and it really does kind of make a further argument of you need all of these different elements to make something successful. All right, fifth one. No risk, no reward. Walt Disney embraced a very, very high stakes risk. He could have lost his house. He could have lost everything. And even in the documentary, he talks about how he's been broke multiple times before, and that he might go broke again making Disneyland. And this is a real risk. Like, you think of this is not a young man who doesn't have a lot to lose. This is a world-renowned storyteller that's being basically shown, or not showcasing, I guess is a better word, every day or every week of his progress on the biggest gamble of his life and his career. It's going on TV. The world is watching. They want to see Disneyland happen, and I'm sure there were tons of people that also wanted to see Disneyland fail, if I had to make a guess. And Walt Disney really did have that vision and that passion, and I think there was a quote about reckless devotion to ideas that was shared in the film. And you think of that devotion to the outcome of his risk, like that's a gamble I would take. When you think of somebody that has that level of passion, that has that level of vision, can also communicate that level of passion and vision, so it is that contagious thing. And you start thinking about, well, yes, it's a very high risk, but what if it hadn't been? What if it had been something smaller, something safer, something more affordable? Would it be the incredible almost 71 years old theme park in Southern California that's still known as the happiest place on earth, that millions of people travel to have that Disney experience that's like nowhere else in the world? That just wouldn't happen, because he really leaned into this high risk, high stakes gamble. The world really legitimately was changed. It changed entertainment, it changed travel, it changed so many different things. And that came because he was willing to really have that reckless devotion to ideas. He was willing to go broke for this. He was willing to ruffle some feathers with those around him because he believed in this idea that much. And I'm like, I have to question this. I'm like, how many times do we have that level of, let's go with reckless devotion as a term. How many times do we have that level of reckless devotion as we're pursuing a dream? I mean, I'm even thinking of this with Daps. Like, as I'm thinking about Daps Magic, yeah, I think I have reckless devotion. I don't have that level of reckless devotion. I have a dream of a place that's all about keeping kind, sharing magic, and focusing on positive stuff. And that has involved lots of risk. That has involved getting out of my comfort zone multiple times. That has involved a lot of sacrifices through the years. Nothing like what Walt did, though. And then my question is like, well, you know, am I dreaming big enough with Daps Magic? Am I, looking far enough forward into what I really would love to see this become? Because I think the bigger the dream, the bigger the passion, the more exciting it is, the more fun it is, and the bigger the reward at the end of the day. And that's something that really builds into the resilience and the determination to keep moving forward. We often hear the quote about, what is it? Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's just facing it and continuing to move forward. I don't remember exactly how the quote goes, but you're basically pushing through the fear despite everything that's happening. And you hear in this documentary how often Walt was stressed. You hear in this documentary, and you see it, the literally physical barriers in the timelines that could have stopped Disneyland from being Disneyland. And if there's no Disneyland, what would be the end game then? Like, what does the rest of Walt Disney's story and the Disney company's story end up being if things just didn't work out the way they did and we got that messy process? And that messy progress is probably a better way to put it, that ended up making Disneyland open on July 17th. I don't know. But what I do know is there were tons of challenges. Walt was clearly stressed. There's just no way to not be stressed with all of this. And Disneyland Handcrafted shows the stress, and it shows that he kept focusing on the end goal. And that's why the vision and the passion is so important, because then when you are embarking on this high stakes journey, you have that end goal, and you can get buffeted by the winds. I'm thinking of a sailboat in the moment. You look at the horizon, this is the direction we're going, and yes, you're going to get bumped around a bit, but this is the goal, and we're going to go back and forth to get to that goal, but that's the direction we're going, no matter what happens along the way. The final thing that kind of popped up in my head, and maybe this isn't the biggest lesson, but it's something that really continues today, and I think it's a lesson that's grown. And maybe it is the biggest lesson. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think about all of these things. And honestly, I'd really love to have a conversation with this about you, because these are just thoughts I've had watching this movie several times now. And I was going to write into an article, but then I was like, I'm just going to speak it out and see what happens, and hopefully people like this. But the final thing that really was my takeaway, and I could do a ton more, but this is the one I'm going to use today, is the focus on feelings. Walt Disney wanted people to feel better when they left Disneyland. That was one of his things that he really was focused on when he was creating Disneyland. He really wanted it to be a place where people went and were happy. He wanted them to be better when they left Disneyland than when they went in, because of the experience they had there. And the first day was a little bit rough. We as Disney fans, and I'm sure the history community, recognize it as Black Sunday. And despite all of that, yes, there was mistakes. Yes, there were challenges. Yes, there weren't water fountains. But you look at the videos, and you look at the pictures, and you look at the the outcome of this. And despite it being Black Sunday, think of the millions of people. They've said 900 million in the last 70 years that have come to Disneyland. It couldn't have been that black. People went home. They talked about their experience. They shared about their experience. Maybe it was watching the experience people had on TV or reading about it in the newspaper, and they wanted to go see that. And if they weren't feeling better and they weren't feeling happier when they left Disneyland than when they went in, they probably wouldn't have come back. They wouldn't have gone home and shared about these incredible things that they'd seen and done at the happiest place on earth. It would have been a very different discussion. And we all know that these discussions kind of have ripple effects, and they get out there, and and they can't really be contained. They just continue to trickle out. And I think one of the things that Walt understood is it wasn't just about creating something that was magical to him. It was about creating something that would be magical to everybody. You know, I love the opening line of the dedication speech because it says, to all who come to this happy place. Not this group of people, not that group of people, not people that were Walt Disney's age and had the same family story as Walt Disney, not people that had a certain, financial level or whatever. He really wanted this to be a place where all people could go to be happy and feel welcomed. And at its very core, that's such a fantastic definition of hospitality. And I think about this, when I'm meeting people in the parks, when I'm chatting with them online, when we get to hang out, whatever it is like, are we as happy and making people as happy because they've interacted with us and gotten to meet us with Daps Magic like Walt did? Because I think that's such a phenomenal thing to do. Because, it's the quote, people don't care what they do or people don't remember what you do. They remember how you made them feel. And I think Walt Disney instinctively knew that. He knew that he could make the most magical park in the world, the Magic Kingdom, with a floating riverboat, with a castle at the end of Main Street, with a rocket that was, kind of a beacon of hope for the future. And he knew he could build all of these great things. But he also knew that if people didn't feel happy and great about them, the rest wouldn't matter. And I think that's such an important thing. And I thought it was such a great quote to include in Disneyland Handcrafted, was the fact that Walt Disney did want people to feel better when they left Disneyland. And I hope that people feel better after they've interacted with me. I hope they feel better after they've been to Daps Magic or been to Daps Magic HQ or our Facebook, whatever it is. Like, I think that's such a good example to try to follow, whether it's for an organization like Daps Magic, whether it's for a business, or even whether it's in our own lives, just in our social circles or our day-to-day lives or jobs or whatever it is. But it was just something that really stuck with me. Like, each one of these came from basically a moment in Disneyland Handcrafted that I went, huh, interesting. And I'm sure I could watch this one time, 12 times more, whatever it is, and come up with 6, 12, 15 lessons from Walt Disney that really pop out of Disneyland Handcrafted, because the way this film was made and the way the story was shared, Leslie Iwerks really did capture not just the building of a park, but also the building of a foundation for an organization that really we recognize now as Disney Experiences. And, that's an organization that really does have vision and passion. It's an organization that's willing to go and build things and wade through the mess and figure things out. Like, I think of the Halcyon as I'm talking about this. Like, I would have loved to experience the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. Yes. And it didn't work. Is that the end of Star Wars in the parks? No. Is that the end of the Disney parks? No. They learned lessons from it. It already looks like we're seeing some of the lessons that were learned from it on the Disney Cruise Line, if I had to make a guess, with some of the ways they're interacting with guests and creating some experiences on that ship. But that's part of the process. Disney's willing, even though it's this massive, massive company now, with hundreds of sub-companies in it and projects and stories it's telling, it's willing to still take some risks, and it's willing to really wade through that mess. And I think there's still beauty in that. And I think that's what makes Disney exciting, is when you see these things that sometimes don't work, but they tried. And I love that they haven't lost that. I also love that they still recognize the importance of the individual people that make the bigger picture happen. One of the things that I love on the Instagram for the Walt Disney Imagineering organization is that the fact that they focus quite often when something new opens, they're like, oh, this person did art design. Oh, this person did this. Oh, this person did that. And it'll be a picture with little arrows on it. I think it's one of the greatest things that they do because it really does put a face to the project, and it shows the people and the passion behind the project. And there's sacrifice and heart and so many different things that happened for each of these that came up. And then we all come back to that thing. Walt Disney said, to all who come to this happy place, welcome. And I think Disney still is a happy place. I think it's one of the few places that you can go in the world with all of its craziness, where you can focus on the happy, you can focus on the fun, you can focus on creating memories with your families and friends and whoever, because you got to go to these happy places, whether it's in Anaheim, Florida, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, or Paris, or the beyond, because now the ships are basically everywhere. Disney is still about, yes, storytelling, but also creating happy memories. And that's something that's really fun to think about. Disney today versus Disneyland 1954, as we watch this plot of land turn from ripped out orange groves into Main Street, into Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, Frontierland. And I think that's something to keep in mind, is that there's power in the process, and there's power in continuing to move forward, having that vision and that passion. And I hope this is something that you like. If you like this episode, let me know and we'll do it again. But it's something that Daps Magic, we really are about the Disney and positive stuff. And I think sometimes we get so busy sharing the stories that are positive stories. They're fun stories. They're informational stories, sometimes more, less, depending on what the subject matter is. But I think we also need to remember to, slow down once in a while, look at what's happening, in this case, Disneyland Handcrafted, and look at what can we take away from these other than that was really cool. That was really amazing what they did with Disneyland. There's a lot of risk here. Man, OSHA would have hated this. Lots of things like that. And I think when we can focus on these lessons and these stories of positive stuffs, it changes our focus a little bit. And one of the things I love to think about and to remind myself and those around me is that what you focus on grows. And there's a lot of different things that we could focus on right now. And I think we could always use more positivity in our lives. And so maybe once in a while, we'll do an episode like this where we focus solely on something that's positive and the takeaways that we can get from it. And maybe I'll have a guest on. Maybe I won't. We will see. Let me know in the comments what you think we should do in the future with episodes like this, or if we should do them at all. Maybe this won't work. I'm willing to take that risk. But I would love to see if we can't focus occasionally on these specific stories or specific, documentaries, and see what we can pull out of them, and see what the positive is in there that we can use to not just make our lives a little bit better, but the lives around us a little bit better and the world around us a little bit better, because we all could use a little bit more positivity in our life and a little bit more hope. And I think all of those things just build on each other. So hopefully you like this. Hopefully this isn't just some crazy experiment that just goes nowhere. And hopefully it's something that you walked away going like, I liked it. Or maybe, that was weird, but it was okay. I wouldn't mind another one. Perfect world? This is your favorite Daps Magic Disney and Positive Stuff episode ever, and we do a bunch more of these, and we have people that join me, and we'll talk about them, and maybe in context of different stories and what our takeaways are. Anyway, you need to let me know. You can do that if you go to Daps Magic HQ. That is the probably easiest way for me to make sure I see it, just because I do get a lot of messages on social media and sometimes they get lost. And I'd love to connect with you there. Facebook is great. YouTube is great also. We've got a lot of stuff going up right now, as we always do. And it's exciting stuff. It's fun stuff. It's stuff that I hope when you see it makes you smile. I hope you walk away a little bit happier because you came across our content versus whatever else is going on in the world. I'm also going to leave you with one last question. As you go about your day, as you move forward into 2026, because it's still fairly early in the year, what's something that's kind of your handcrafted goal that you would like to think that you're working on this year? And then reframe the question once you've thought about what I just said, and ask yourself, what handcrafted goal am I going to work on this year? What is that handcrafted goal that as 2027 begins, I can look back and say, you know what? Walt did this in a year, and here's what I did in a year. I don't think it's going to be the same level of building a brand new theme park that's unlike anything we've ever heard before or imagined before. But maybe it's a new idea. Maybe it's a new skill. Maybe it's a new instrument. Maybe it's reading a certain number of books or a book. What is something that will make your world a little bit more positive and a little bit better, and the world around you a little bit more positive and a little bit better, that you can handcraft in the coming year? I'd love to know. Maybe it's something simple. Maybe it's something more in depth. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. But that is what I've got for you on this Daps Magic Disney and Positive Stuff. I really hope you've enjoyed it. I'd love to get ratings from you on whatever podcast platform you're listening to for this episode. And I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to see you in the parks. Most of all, I'd love to walk with you on this journey in Disney and Positive Stuff as we try to really keep kind and share magic. I really think we can change the world that way and make it a better place. With that in mind, make it a great week, everybody, and keep kind.